At my grandma's will reading, my whole family rushed in demanding her $46 million, her house, her investments, and her company. But the moment the lawyer opened the final envelope, the room erupted, voices clashing, chairs scraping. And then he revealed a truth that froze every heartbeat in the room. Before I tell you how it all began, do me a small favor, tap subscribe and drop a comment saying where you're watching from so this story can travel farther. The reading room at Crane & Associates felt like it could burst. Too many bodies squeezed into a space meant for half as many. The air was thick with perfume, cologne, tension, and the silent greed that made grown adults shift in their seats like anxious children. My father, Victor Langley, sat in the front row in a suit so crisp it looked pressed by angels. Every 30 seconds he checked his watch, exhaling sharply as if grief had a deadline. My mother, Helena, sat beside him clutching her purse to her chest like someone might steal it, ironic, considering what she was here to steal. She hadn't spoken to me since the funeral. Just tossed me cold, sharp glances that sliced deeper than any insult. My father leaned toward his personal lawyer, whispering, "This is taking too long. I have a board meeting at 3. Even now, at the reading of his own mother's will, he couldn't pretend to care for 5 minutes. That was Victor in every sense, always present, never there. Against the wall stood my Uncle Rupert, built like a boulder with the temper of a storm. His eyes darted around the room, already imagining profits and purchases from money he hadn't inherited yet. His wife, young enough to still be taking selfies when no one looked, filed her nails as if waiting for her spa appointment instead of a legal reading. On the other side, my Uncle Simon tapped his foot so fast it looked like he was trying to start a small fire. The youngest of the siblings, a lifetime gambler, he was sweating through his shirt despite the ice-cold AC. Behind him sat his ex-wife with their 2 kids, none of whom he'd properly acknowledged in years. All of them waiting. All of them hungry. Distant cousins filled the remaining seats, some people I didn't even recognize. One man, apparently somebody's boyfriend, took notes on his phone like he was preparing for a business takeover. The smell of desperation was thick. 3 days after burying my grandmother, these people were practically salivating over her wealth. "Where the hell is Crane?" my father snapped, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "This is unprofessional." The door opened exactly at that moment, and Harold Crane entered, the calm center of the storm. At 72, he walked like a man who had survived thousands of family feuds exactly like this and had the patience to outlive all of them. He placed his leather folio on the podium and looked across the room quietly. When his eyes found mine, there was something in them, not pity, not even sadness. More like understanding. "Thank you all for coming," Harold began. "Before we start, I must remind everyone that Mrs. Easton's will was prepared with meticulous care. It is legally airtight. Any attempt to challenge it will be met with the full force of this firm." My father scoffed loudly. "Let's get on with it." Harold's jaw tightened a fraction. "Very well. The last will and testament of Mabel Elise Easton, executed 6 months prior to her passing." You could feel the room freeze. This was the moment they'd all been waiting for, the moment greed would be rewarded, when bank accounts and properties and assets would be parceled out like candy. But as Harold opened the first document, I wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about Mabel's hand in mine the week before she died, how light it felt, how fragile she had become, how she whispered that she was proud of me. None of these people knew that version of her. None of them had been there. Not one. Harold began reading, but his voice faded for a moment as my mind drifted back 3 years. Back then, I was nobody special, just a construction foreman in Riverton. I woke before dawn, brewed bitter coffee, and walked job sites where steel beams rose slowly into the sky. My life was sturdy but simple. A 1-bedroom apartment, a truck older than me, dinners that came from microwaves or fast food menus. I built things. I liked that. Things that stayed when people didn't. My family was a puzzle missing half its pieces. Victor, the father who rated people by their income. Helena, the mother who collected charity events like trophies. Rupert and Simon, 2 brothers whose failures were always someone else's fault. We were bound by blood but not by love. Everything changed on one October morning. I still remember exactly how the sunlight hit my phone screen when Mabel called. Her voice sounded thinner, heavier. "Evan, sweetheart," she said. "Can you come visit this weekend? I need to see you." Those words struck me like cold water. "Of course, Grandma. Is something wrong?" "We'll talk when you arrive," she said. The drive to Brindle Cove usually took 2 hours. I made it in 90 minutes. Her home stood high on the cliff, windows reflecting the crashing waves. But inside, I found her at the kitchen table, stirring tea. She looked at me with calm eyes and said, "I have pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The mug in my hand burned, but I didn't let go. She told me she needed someone she trusted. Someone who wasn't playing a silent game of inheritance. She told me my father had already begun circling, talking about protecting the estate. She said my uncles had smelled opportunity. I told her, I'll move in tomorrow. She told me to think about my job, my life. I told her she was my life. She smiled and reached out to hold my hand with fingers that already felt too delicate. That was the moment everything changed. And that was the moment the wolves began circling. Moving in with Grandma wasn't something I questioned. I didn't weigh pros and cons or wonder about what I might lose. I only thought about her, this woman who had built an empire from worn-out boots and grit, who had stitched together a life for a family that rarely appreciated her. She needed someone who cared, not someone who calculated. That alone made the decision easy. I packed my apartment in 6 hours. My boss didn't even argue when I asked for indefinite leave. He just sighed, patted my shoulder, and told me to go take care of her. By the next evening, I was carrying boxes into one of her guest rooms, the ocean wind sharp and cold on my skin. She stood in the doorway watching me, her smile small but real. "You always were the one who showed up," she whispered. The first week felt like learning a new rhythm. She still moved around on her own, slow but steady. Some mornings she insisted on pouring her own tea. Some nights she stayed up with me watching old movies she claimed to hate but secretly loved. But underneath those normal moments was a current neither of us ignored, an understanding that something terrible was moving toward us, silent and sure. The second week, my father arrived. His Mercedes glided into the driveway like a shark approaching a shore. He walked in without knocking, briefcase in hand, face tight with false concern. "Mother," he said, barely glancing my way, "we need to discuss your assets." She set her mug down slowly. "Victor, I haven't seen you in 6 months. Your first words aren't even hello. This is important." He spread out papers across the table like a salesman presenting a pitch. "It's just precautionary. Standard estate protection for someone in your condition." I stepped closer. "What's that supposed to mean?" He didn't even look at me. "These trusts will prevent any mishandling of funds. They shift control, temporarily, to more capable hands." "More capable?" she repeated softly, as if tasting the words. Victor nodded with the confidence of a man who had always believed he was the smartest person in every room. She picked up one of the documents and scanned it carefully. Then she slid it back toward him. "These trusts would give you immediate control of my accounts." "Yes," he said. "For your protection." "I have cancer, not incompetence," she replied. "And I have Harold for legal matters." My father's jaw twitched. "Mother, I'm trying to help you." "No, Victor," she said, her voice iron-wrapped velvet. "You're trying to help yourself. There's a difference." His face flushed a deep, ugly red. He grabbed the papers and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Through the glass I watched him call someone, angry, animated, pacing like a spoiled child denied a toy. Within an hour, Mom called the landline. "Mabel, darling," she cooed, sugary sweet in that way she used when she wanted something. "Victor is just concerned. Perhaps I should visit? Help arrange things?" Grandma sighed, looked at me, then answered. "Helena, you haven't visited in 2 years. Don't pretend you suddenly care." Silence. Then a click. The line went dead. Grandma set the phone down gently. "The vultures smell weakness," she murmured. "Watch how quickly they circle." She was right. Over the next 3 months, it went from subtle to shameless. One night at midnight, a fist pounded on the front door. I opened it to find Uncle Rupert swaying slightly, reeking of expensive bourbon. "I need 50,000, he said, pushing past me as if the house belonged to him. "My restaurant's bleeding out. She has millions sitting around doing nothing, she can help me." "She's asleep," I said firmly. "I don't care," he shouted, jabbing a finger into my chest. "I'm her son. You think playing nurse makes you special? How much has she promised you? 10%? 20? "I'm here because I love her," I said. He laughed, harsh and cracked. "Love doesn't pay bills, kid. Get her down here." I blocked the hallway. "Try pushing past me." He glared at me, 2 men inches apart, both refusing to move. Finally he muttered, "This isn't over," and staggered out into the night. The next morning, Grandma sat by her window, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Did I fail them?" she whispered. "How did my boys forget everything I taught them?" I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault. I wanted to tell her people change, that money blinds, that greed rots the soul. But all I could do was sit beside her, hold her hand, and let her cry. The attacks didn't stop. They only changed form. Uncle Simon hired a psychiatrist to evaluate her. The doctor arrived unannounced one afternoon, clipboard in hand. "I'm here to conduct a cognitive assessment." Grandma stared him down like he was a child. "Young man," she said, "I built a transport company from nothing. I negotiated with contractors, unions, and banks. I can still beat most people at chess. I know Shakespeare and my bank passwords. And I certainly know when someone is being manipulated. Leave. He left within 2 minutes. Simon escalated. He called Adult Protective Services, claiming I was exploiting her. He tried to bribe her housekeeper for documents. He even left voicemail messages pretending to be concerned while telling others she was losing her mind. Then came the recordings. She had asked me to install a call recording system for medical emergencies. She'd winked. What it captured was uglier than anything we imagined. Victor asking doctors about her mental decline. Rupert swearing that if her will didn't favor him, he would contest it until every dollar was mine. Simon planning with Victor to file an immediate freeze on all her accounts the moment she passed. Grandma listened to every recording with a quiet face. But her hands trembled. At least now I know where we stand, she whispered. Her health declined faster after that. Hospice came. The house grew quieter, darker, softer. Some nights she couldn't speak, some mornings she could barely sit up. I learned to change 4 bags, track medication schedules, help her walk when she wanted to see the ocean. I watched the strongest woman I knew turn into something fragile, translucent, but never weak. Yet beneath the frailty, I could feel something building in her, a plan. A storm gathering. One gray February morning, the driveway filled with Harold Crane's Lincoln. He walked in carrying a thick folio and a small recorder. "Evan, I need privacy with your grandmother," he said. She was already in her best navy suit, hair brushed, eyes sharp. They locked themselves in her study for 4 hours. Pen scribbled. Papers rustled. Her voice, clear and firm, answered questions. Then silence. When they emerged, Harold rested a hand on my shoulder. "Your grandmother," he said, "is remarkable. Remember that in the months to come. Trust her choices." I didn't know what he meant. Not yet. After Harold left that February afternoon, I found Grandma sitting in her study staring out at the ocean, her fingers resting lightly on a locked drawer. When she heard me enter, she quickly closed it, as if protecting secrets too heavy for daylight. "What was all that about?" I asked. "Insurance," she said simply. "The kind that doesn't expire. The kind that makes sure the right things happen for the right reasons." She wouldn't say more, but from that moment her energy changed. Even as her body weakened, her mind sharpened. She moved with purpose, made calls privately, kept notes with a precision that reminded me of her business days. She documented everything, every missed visit, every manipulative call, every time my father or uncles tried to pry information from her doctors. She had me help her organize folders labeled with dates and initials. She asked me to stack them in the study cabinet. One evening, I opened one by accident thinking it was medical paperwork. Inside were transcripts of recorded calls, my father, my uncles, their lawyers. I froze. She closed it gently and said, "Not yet, Evan. The time will come." Her voice wasn't angry. It was steady, like she was preparing for a storm she already knew how to navigate. Weeks passed. The cancer spread aggressively. Some days she couldn't even keep water down. Hospice nurses visited regularly. They were kind, gentle, almost invisible in their care. Nights were the hardest. She often woke from pain or nightmares, and I would sit beside her, adjusting pillows, holding her hand, listening to whatever memory surfaced. She told me about her childhood during the Depression, ration food, shoes stuffed with cardboard, winters so cold she slept with bricks heated in the fireplace. She told me about the first truck she bought when she started her delivery business, a beat-up vehicle that broke down every week until she practically rebuilt the engine herself. She talked about raising 3 sons who grew up believing money solved everything because she never let them see how hard she worked. "I wanted them to have more than I ever did," she said one night, her voice thin but certain. "But somewhere along the way, I gave them everything except what mattered." 2 weeks before she died, something happened, something that told me she had finished whatever plan she'd crafted with Harold. It was late evening. She reached for my hand, tight, unexpectedly strong. "Evan," she whispered, "promise me something. Anything. When Harold reads the will, no matter what happens, no matter how they react, do not defend me. Do not explain. Let them speak. Let them show who they really are." My chest tightened. "Grandma, what did you do?" "I set things right," she said softly. "Or as close to right as the time left allows." She squeezed my hand. "Promise." "I promise." She gave me the faintest smile, one I didn't understand until much later. "Good. You're going to be all right, sweetheart. Better than all right. You're going to learn what real wealth means." 3 days before her funeral, she passed away. It happened in the quietest, gentlest way. The sunset poured through her bedroom window, painting her sheets gold and pink. She looked at it, sighed softly, and whispered, "The truth always surfaces, Evan." Like oil on water, it always rises. Watch for it. Those were her last words. The obituary ran in 3 newspapers. By noon, relatives I didn't even know existed were calling my father to ask about funeral details. People who hadn't spoken to her in years suddenly wanted to know the schedule, the dress code, whether there would be a reception. My father flew in wearing a black designer suit, sunglasses he didn't need, and an expression rehearsed in the mirror. My mother arrived separately, careful to walk slowly between the photographers as if grief had a preferred angle. Rupert showed up in a tailored jacket too tight for his broad shoulders, eyes scanning the crowd like calculating who would get what. Simon came jittery and unshaven, muttering to himself, checking his phone every few seconds as if debt collectors might burst through the chapel doors. The funeral was beautiful in a way that made me angry. My father delivered a touching eulogy about family values that would have been perfect if he'd ever lived a single word of it. Rupert talked about her guidance, forgetting he hadn't visited her in nearly a year. Even Simon cried, though he spent the entire reception loudly speculating about who Mabel left the house to. After the burial, Harold approached me quietly. "The will reading will be next week," he said. "Your grandmother wanted it soon." I nodded. I already suspected something huge was coming. I just didn't know how big. The week dragged on. Each day felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane, still on the surface but filled with pressure that had nowhere to go. Then the day arrived. The conference room at Crane & Associates looked like a battleground disguised in polished wood. Every seat was filled. People stood against the walls. The air conditioner hummed, but the room felt hot with tension. My father sat in front next to his lawyer, a woman with sharp cheekbones and sharper instincts. My mother sat beside a financial advisor who kept adjusting his tie like he knew this meeting could change his entire career. Rupert cracked his knuckles on repeat, grinding them like gears turning in his head. Simon wiped his forehead with a trembling hand, his shirt clinging to his back. Me? I sat quietly at the end of the long table, away from the boiling greed at the center. At exactly 2 p.m., the door opened. And in walked Harold. He didn't rush. He didn't smile. He placed the leather folio on the table, took out his glasses, and gave the room a steady, measured look, the look of a man who had spent 40 years watching families destroy themselves over paper and ink. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to remind everyone that Mrs. Easton executed this will 6 months ago while in full mental capacity. She was evaluated by 3 medical professionals and 2 independent attorneys. Any attempts to contest it will be met with the full resources of this firm." My father's lawyer opened her mouth, but Harold held up a hand. "All questions will be addressed after the full reading." He opened the folio. The room held its breath. He lifted the first document. And with the first sentence, the room changed. "To my son, Victor Langley," he began, "I leave my complete collection of family photographs." My father blinked. "What?" Harold continued without pause. "Photographs of every birthday, every holiday, every moment you missed while building your fortune. May they remind you of what success truly cost you." My father's jaw fell open. And the room erupted into whispers. Little did they know, this was just the beginning. The room fell so silent after Victor's inheritance that I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. My father stared at Harold like the words were written in a language only meant to insult him. Family photographs. Just photos. Photos of the moments he'd traded for meetings, business trips, money, and ego. It was the first time I had seen my father truly stunned. But there was no time for him to recover. Harold lifted the next page. "To my son, Rupert Easton, I leave my personal recipe journal, the one containing meals you always claimed you could improve, yet never once cooked for me. May you learn the difference between talking about effort and actually making it." A few gasps echoed. Rupert shot to his feet, knocking his chair backward so hard it scraped the floor. "This is ridiculous. Where is the money? Where is the estate?" Harold ignored him and continued. "To my son, Simon Easton, I leave my grandfather's antique deck of playing cards, cards he used to teach me that gambling with family is the only bet that guarantees loss." Simon's face turned pale, then purple. "She's mocking us. This can't be real." Murmurs rippled across the room like a dark wave. Then Harold turned the page. "To my daughter-in-law, Helena Langley, I leave my costume jewelry, pieces that glitter but hold no real value, much like the affection you offered me over the years." Helena gasped, clutched her throat, and whispered, "How dare she?" The room erupted. Voices clashing, chairs shifting, people stepping forward as if proximity would change the ink on the page. Some demanded explanations. Some cursed under their breath. Some looked ready to faint. But Harold simply waited. And when the noise died, he reached for a smaller envelope. "To my grandson, Evan Langley. I felt my heart clench. I leave my 1947 blue coupe, the first purchase I made with my company's profit. It still runs because I cared for it, not because I replaced it. Love is the same. All at once, every eye in the room turned toward me, confused, angry, suspicious. They wanted to see the golden announcement, the moment where millions fell into my lap. Except that moment didn't come. Because Harold closed the envelope and set it aside. My father shot up from his seat. Where is the rest? Where is the $46 million estate? Where is the company? The investments? The properties? And then Harold pulled out the thickest document of all. This, he said, is the financial disclosure. The room snapped into silence. Harold inhaled, then read. 3 years ago, Mrs. Easton began liquidating her assets. She sold her transport company to her employees for $1 on the condition that future profits be placed into their retirement programs. A stunned hush. She liquidated all investment portfolios, all properties, and converted everything into cash. My father leaned forward. So where is it? Harold smiled, small and sharp. It has already been distributed. Chaos exploded. Distributed? To whom? What are you talking about? Harold spoke over the noise. $30 million established the Mabel Easton Foundation for Pancreatic Cancer Research, with a special focus on early detection for low-income patients. People froze. $8 million now funds full-ride college scholarships for 200 first-generation students. The cousins stared at each other in disbelief. $5 million was donated to 15 food banks and shelters across the state. $2 million went to Doctors Without Borders. The room was dead silent. No breathing. No movement. Just shock. And her home, Harold continued, has been sold to the state for $1. It will be turned into the Easton Family Preserve, named the Evan Easton Preserve, as per her request. My breath caught. People whipped their heads toward me again, but this time with something hotter than anger. Envy. Blame. Hatred. My father pointed at me with a shaking finger. He knew. He manipulated her. This is fraud. Harold calmly tapped his folder. She left affidavits. 5 witnesses. 3 legal recordings. Every action she took was independent and voluntary. And Mr. Evan Langley had no knowledge of any financial decisions. My father lunged across the table and grabbed Harold's collar. You did this. You helped her destroy us. Security rushed in. Cameras on the walls blinked red, capturing every second. Let go, Harold said quietly. Unless you'd like this assault added to your record. My father's lawyer pulled him back, hissing, stop before you get arrested. Rupert threw his chair. Simon kicked the wall. Helena sobbed into a silk scarf. Several cousins stormed out, slamming the door behind them. Harold waited until the storm broke apart. There is one final bequest, he said. He lifted a thin envelope with my name. $1 million has been placed into a trust under Evan Langley's management. This trust may only be used to help any family member in medical crisis who has no other support. Everyone froze again. Harold read Mabel's final words aloud. Evan will help even those who don't deserve it. That is who he is. This trust ensures he will never be punished for choosing kindness. My father spat, we'll destroy you. You'll regret ever stepping foot in this family. I said nothing. Grandma had told me not to. One by one, they stormed out of the conference room, broken plans, burning anger, shattered pride. Everything they believed was theirs had slipped away the moment they underestimated the woman who raised them. When they were gone, Harold handed me an envelope. She wanted you to read this alone. I drove to the cliff where her house once stood. The sign for the future preserve was already in place. The ocean wind felt colder without her beside me. I opened the letter. Her handwriting trembled on the page. My sweetest Evan? If you're reading this, the storm has passed. What you witnessed today was the truth surfacing. Money reveals hearts faster than time ever will. I couldn't change who they became, but I could stop money from destroying you too. You were the only one who stayed. The only one who came when I called. The only one who chose love without expecting anything back. That is the real inheritance. Freedom. Clarity. Peace. She ended with, build a life you deserve. Help those who need it. And remember, real wealth is never measured in dollars. 2 years passed. My father never spoke to me again. Helena moved states. Rupert went bankrupt, again. Simon disappeared into debt. But the trust? It helped 17 families. A worker's daughter with leukemia. A retired teacher needing heart surgery. A young mother abandoned during pregnancy. Every time I signed a check, I felt her hand on mine. When the Easton Preserve opened, hundreds of families came. Children running where her roses once bloomed. Couples watching sunsets from the bluff she loved. A little girl tugged my sleeve and pointed at the plaque with my name. Is that you? She asked. Yes, I smiled. Why is your name on the park? Because my grandma believed the best parts of life should be free for everyone. She sounds nice, the girl said. Is she here? I looked at the glowing ocean, the laughing families, the place reborn. Yes, I whispered. She's here. And she always will be. Thank you for watching. If my journey moved you, take a second to hit like and share this story with someone who needs a reminder that love, not money, is the real legacy. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe and tell me in the comments what real wealth means to you.